Well, if you expected consistency and truth-telling from the administration hours after they did bombing runs against Iran's nuclear capacity, you've come to the wrong administration. We already have inconsistencies on fundamental facts like, did we just destroy and or, quote, obliterate all of Iran's nuclear capacity, or did we just set them back? Are the only facilities that the Iranians have in the 3 locations that we hit? Or is there a 4th location that they've been working on since 2020, 2021 that's even deeper than Fordo, the one that we had to drop a dozen $500 million bombs on from a B-2 bomber to set back the nuclear program, but not obliterate it? Is there another facility that has been out there and known by the international community that we ignored? Let's get to the bottom of the Trump administration's approach to war here on Legal AF. We all know what's happened. We woke up to it, or we saw it last night. But now we see the spin and the inconsistencies. Donald Trump said, and I quote, that the nuclear capacity and the ability to make bombs of Iran has been, quote, obliterated. Same word that Pete Hegseth, our head of the Pentagon, said at a press conference. The problem with that is standing right next to him was General Caine, who was elevated to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he didn't use the word obliterated. And the Vice President, J.D. Vance, didn't use the word obliterated. They said something quite different. They said that it was the capacity for Iran to have nuclear weapons has been, quote, according to J.D. Vance, substantially delayed. The general standing next to Pete Hegseth, the Fox and Friends news host, he said it had been set back, but he refused to use the word obliterated. The only one using the word obliterated, a talking point of the day, Pete Hegseth, to back up Trump. Fordo was one of the 3 sites that were hit. Fordo is about, if you're in New York and you looked up at a 23, 24-story building, that would be where we think the centrifuges and the other materials to enrich uranium and therefore make a bomb were located. That's why we had to use the mother of all bunker busters at $500 million apiece. And according to reports, the U.S., through its B-2 bombers, those are the stealth bombers, dropped 12 bombs so $6 billion worth of bombs to Fordo. And we're still not sure, despite, laser guidance and guidance from, accurate GPS, because it's being dropped from 50,000 feet in the air, whether those 12 bombs did the job. Let's assume they did. Let's assume they did. Let's assume it got through because Fordo is in a mountain. Let's assume it broke through the mountain, and because they're dropping 12 in a row. Think of the famous Star Wars scene trying to blow up the Death Star. They got to get all 12 in the same hole down to the bottom. Let's assume they did that. Let's assume that, and what they did at Natanz to knock all the electrical grid off and to destroy Natanz has, quote unquote, set back the nuclear program. I'll use another hot take to talk about the cost. I mean, the personal cost and the exposure now that America has for walking into a war to support Israel. 40,000 troops, American troops, are within a 2,000-mile range of the ballistic missiles and other attack capabilities of Iran as we speak. Now, you hear the U.S. government, and they need to say this, that there'll be tremendous retaliation. Marco Rubio, don't even think twice to try to retaliate. We have nothing against the Iranian people. We're not trying to do regime change. We're just trying to take out the nuclear capacity of Iran, the bully of the Middle East. That's the talking points. The attacks on the Biden administration, they can't help themselves. Every time they give a press conference, on one hand, they're praising God, Jesus Christ. On the other hand, this is Hegseth. On the other hand, they're attacking Joe Biden. What they don't want to talk about is the reason we even know about Fordo as the hardened mountain facility that we just dropped $6 billion worth of bombs on to support Israel's war. And to change the equation of the weather in the Middle East is because Barack Obama and his intelligence community located Fordo, outed Fordo, and talked about Fordo as they try to negotiate a nuclear non-proliferation deal, no loose nukes with Iran. But there's a couple of missing pieces here. There is very good intelligence. I know Donald Trump doesn't believe in his intelligence. One note I'll come back to before this hot take is over. As I said a day or so ago, Tulsi Gabbard, as head of the National Intelligence Directorate for the United States, heading up 14 different intelligence agencies, is effectively over. You know who was not in the war room? It was all white guys. Tulsi Gabbard was nowhere to be found. It was Caine. It was J.D. Vance. It was Hegseth. It was Trump. It was Susie Wiles, the chief of staff, and it was John Ratcliffe, the head of the CIA. Missing was the head of the National Intelligence Department, cabinet level position, Tulsi Gabbard. She's gone. After her intelligence was rejected by Donald Trump, as he adopted Mossad and the intelligence of Israel about how close the Iranians were to making a bomb and how close the Grand Ayatollah was to making the decision to give the green light to make a bomb. She had it as a year out. Israelis had it at days or months out. He went with the Israelis. And she's now out. Now, let me go to the fourth facility that was ignored by this bombing run. There is and has been good intelligence that since 2020, in the mountain known as Pickaxe Mountain, that's the American term, where Natanz is located, that in that mountain, deep below it, double the depth of Fordo. So we're talking about, instead of 330 feet below the surface, up to 660 feet, like a 50-story building turned upside down and shoved below the earth. That there is another facility with centrifuges that they've used as a backup. And if you think that the American leadership led by Trump is trying to figure out the right vocabulary for obliterate versus setback, wait till they have to go after, and they completely ignored this facility. This facility is so well known that I was able to locate it using Google, and I can give you the coordinates. It is at, according to Madrid satellite imaging, it's at 33.724 north, 51.671 east in Pickaxe Mountain. They've been using hallways and tunnels and other things there since 2020 to 2024. It is double the depth of Fordo. We're not sure whether a 12-pack of bunker buster bombs dropped from a B-2 took out Fordo. I assure you it will be infinitely harder, if not impossible, to take out Pickaxe Mountain. And if that's where they've shifted their uranium enrichment to, we're in deep trouble. I did a hot take just the other day because it was obvious that war was coming, that Donald Trump was on a war footing, that he and his evil twin, Netanyahu, and I'm a supporter of Israel, but not of Netanyahu, that not Netanyahu and Trump had figured out that their fortunes are tied together, their legacies are tied together, and that by making each other wartime presidents to try to take out Iran, it could change their legacy and change the weather about how their administrations are collectively doing. The black stain of October 7th, the attack on Israel by Hamas, killing a couple of thousand people and taking more hostage and taking others hostage on Netanyahu, and everything about Donald Trump's criminality, larceny, corruption in first term and second term on full display. It was a solution. They're solving for an equation of terrible legacies of what their obituaries are going to read like. So I did that already. And as I said, the decision to help Israel, having reduced the air support capacity and the defenses of Iran to virtually nil, made it safe to do the bombing run. I get it. And I had already seen reports 3 days ago on the internet. There are websites devoted to tracking military aircraft And I already knew that 2 B-2s had been sent into that region in the last 48 hours. I thought it was a show of force. I didn't realize, of course, that they had actually given the green light to use those. But when you put all of this together, the fact that we ignored this last location, we've left the troops exposed, that we're doing finger waving and wagging in order to try to protect America, that we didn't that the Trump administration refused to consult with Congress, which has the Republicans celebrating and the Democrats talking about a rogue, out of control president who is misusing his war powers again. Whether we should be at war with Iran, this is different than taking out Osama bin Laden. That is the comparison, the talking point that the Republicans are using, MAGA is using, Donald Trump is using. But this was not taking out somebody that was responsible for killing thousands and thousands and thousands of Americans. This was a preemptive strike against Iran that Israel has been itching for the last 10, 15 years. We've been hearing about Iran is almost about to get the nuclear bomb for the last 10, 15 years. Now, Israel was able, through subterfuge, through cyber attacks, to set back Iran's centrifuges, which make enriched uranium, considerably, pushing back the date 2 and 3 years till we got to 2025. Now, I am not doubting the intelligence, wherever it's coming from, about the nuclear, the plutonium, enriched plutonium supply of Iran. It's about 400 kilograms. You can fit in 16 different small vessels. Some of it has been enriched up to 60%. You got to get to 90% for a bomb. There's even reports that some of that enriched uranium is enriched up to 87.5%. I get that the nuclear clock for Iran was rapidly getting to midnight. And I'm not saying that the coordinated efforts of Israel taking the lead and the U.S. following behind to take out the sites that only U.S. could do with its munitions is necessarily wrong at this moment. The planning, though, is pathetic. The exposure to Americans now of being in a war that Donald Trump has chosen to put us in at this particular moment, rather than allow diplomacy to play out, is may be an impeachable offense. We'll have to see it. But my main focus here on this hot take is that the blind spot of the Trump administration, if they're going to go over there and bomb, then bomb the Pickaxe Mountain location so that there's not an ability for Iran within a year to stand back up. Let's not waste $6 billion. Expose everybody to the threat of war, including 40,000 troops, and not take out this last piece. And look at, because it's an indication of the lack of leadership of this administration, look at the lies and the inconsistencies this administration is telling to the American people after the start of this war. Obliterate nuclear capacity? Only Hegseth and Trump say that. General Caine and J.D. Vance don't say that. They can't even get their story straight on their news reports. So I'm going to continue to follow what comes next as Congress, led by the Democrats, try to hold this president accountable and to make sure that this doesn't spiral and set aflame the Middle East and drag us into a further war of Israel's design in the Middle East. I'm all about protecting Israel. I think it is the democracy in the Middle East. We have a moral and strategic commitment to Israel. I have my own commitment to Israel. I want to make that clear. That doesn't mean I can't be a critic of what we just watched last night, and more importantly, in the future, and the poor planning and the lies to the American people. And that's the purpose of this hot take. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event, by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.